Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we're super happy to have you here. And if you've been listening and enjoying for a while, I would be super grateful if you would please take a moment to give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the best and simplest ways to pay it forward and help others find the show so that they too can tap into the powerful perspectives and positive vibrations we are collectively emanating. The other unique and magical way to share this show is by sending any friends you think would benefit from listening to this podcast our Game with the Universe link at positivehead.com/game. Also listed in the show notes, which will serve them up a quote-unquote random episode when they click it. Just instruct them before clicking the link to close their eyes for a moment and sincerely ask the universe to queue up the episode that contains the insight and perspectives that they most need to hear at this point in their life journey, and then click to listen to whatever episode is synchronistically served up to them. I have heard time and time again from people about the incredible results they received playing the game. So just tell your friends magical results are guaranteed or their karma back.
All right, all you positive heads, welcome. Welcome, one and all. I am super grateful you have joined me on this magical today. And today I find myself back home in Arizona. And we made our way through all of the states. I'm grateful to be home. I am grateful to be here with all of you. And I have been processing this whole trip. There is so much to think on, to process, to integrate. And today I know that I mentioned one of the books I picked up in Mount Shasta along the way called The Lemurian, which is a literary magazine that was introduced by the College of the Siskiyous in Weed, California. And this is the very first of this literary magazine. And when I bought this magazine, everyone in the store was so excited. And when I say magazine, it is a paper pamphlet that's folded and stapled together in typewriter type. And there's also some hand drawings in here, which makes it fun to look through. And when I first bought it, I thought there was going to be actually all these Lemurian legends in it. And I didn't page through it too much when I bought it. I just saw all these poems and drawings, and I thought it would be an interesting thing to pick up. Well, I looked at it today because I thought I would share it with you all. And that's not really what it is at all. There is, at the beginning, a Lemurian legend that is told from the publishers of this, or the editor of this publication, and also one poem. And when I first read through it, I thought, you know what? I don't think I'm going to share this today. And then I thought to myself, wait a minute. This was written in 1963, 60 years ago. Now, the climate around this mythology, this cosmology of the Lemurian legend, has sustained itself over 60 years and has grown. And when we look back to 60 years ago and you think about the people who were first getting these downloads, these visions, having these experiences. Back in 1963, that was pretty odd and probably looked down upon, and people were seen as the super black sheep. And these were our way showers. And for people to even begin to write about it, I think sustains this test of time. It shows us that mythology is more than just a story, that there is something to it, because the person who wrote this Lemurian legend was quite skeptical, and at the same time felt it important enough to write about it. I love that because it sustained this quote unquote mythology, this fictional story. Many, many more people have experienced, have seen, have understood what has been actually going on in our history. And throughout this trip I've just taken, I've opened my eyes to the idea, well, my eyes have been open to this idea, but my eyes were open more to the idea that our ancient history is a lot more grandiose than we think it is. What I mean by grandiose is there's a lot more to it. When in Montana, I visited ancient megalithic structures, or what seem to be ancient megalithic structures. They're very fascinating. And when you think about it, you think about all of these structures that are ancient, and they're in all different places all over the world. But you don't think about them being in Montana. But why wouldn't they be? They would be all over the world. And then I think about people like Graham Hancock and his series that created such a stir with all the archaeologists and even some of the Egyptian archaeologists, that the archaeologists in general and the theme of science that we tend to cling on to has a story. And any other idea is just hogwash or just baloney or whatever you want to call it. But the more that time goes by and the more of us that tap in and connect with these places, the more we can see it with our own inner eye, with our mind's eye. And we remember that, hey, I've been here before. There's something to this ancient story. There's a lot more to this ancient story than we know now. And I think there is so much more to learn and discover. As I've made this road trip through these Western states, I saw many, many, many places that looked like ancient ruins, old ancient ruins, faces in the stone. And when there are guardians, faces, archetypes in the stone, they speak to us. And the people who first heard these legends of Lemuria, they were spoken through their mind's eye, through their visions, through their dreams. And I want to honor those people who were able to have the courage, the strength to talk about these visions back in 1963, because it isn't easy now, and it certainly wasn't easy back then. So let's get into this Lemurian legend written by the editor, whose name is Ahmad Azarmi, the editor of the Lemurian College of the Siskiyous in Weed, California, 1963. The Lemurians, who live inside the volcanic slope of Mount Shasta, so the local mythology goes, are the unfortunate remnant of a race of mysterious and exceptional men who once dwelt in the vast continent of Lemuria. Like the fabled island of Atlantis, the Pacific counterpart was supposed long ago to have sunk into the sea, causing its disinherited inhabitants to flee into the mountains or across the waters to other lands. The wandering Lemurians apparently found society unhospitable off their own water-soaked continent and among inferior men and savages, for they have a way of keeping to themselves and out of sight of even the friendliest and most curious of our race. These Lemurians, usually regarded around the Siskiyou area as being exceptionally tall beings with distinctive extrasensory protrusions on their high foreheads, have been reported seen shopping small communities around Mystical Mountain. Since others insist these superior beings are quite easily self-sustaining within their artfully carved caverns and only come among us, usually in disguise, to observe our peculiar ways. No doubt the Lemurians amuse themselves from time to time by looking in upon the spectacle of our frantic adolescent society, struggling uneasily under the crushing weight of innumerable easy-time payment plans. For these tall men had transcended the materialistic world, they say, and had learned to confront existence at a higher, more purely spiritual level. The etymology of the term Lemurian dates back to Roman mythology. Spirits of the dear departed were called lemures in ancient Latin, and the word signifying ghosts was first written in English around 1580. The term was borrowed by zoologists to name a genus of nocturnal mammals of the family Lemuridae, found chiefly in Madagascar off the coast of Africa. These monkey-like black and white creatures were designated lemurs around 1795 because of their ghostly appearance. The name Lemuria was coined by the English zoologist Philip Lutley Scatler, who was trying to explain the geographical distribution of lemurs, which, at that time, were only known to exist in Africa, Madagascar, and in the faraway Southeast Asia. To explain this particular distribution, Scatler postulated a sunken former continent, which he named Lemuria, after the monkey-like lemurs he imagined to have once inhabited it. This hypothetical Lemuria, he felt, once extended from Madagascar across the Indian Ocean to Ceylon and Sumatra. The problem of the distribution of lemurs was largely resolved when fossils of the animals were found in Europe and North America, and talk of Lemuria faded from the discussions of scientists, but mythologists and occultists refused to let the fable die. In 1868, the German biologist Ernst Heinrich Haeckel published, and I'm going to try this, I speak no German, so please forgive me, all you German speakers, but this is just so you can know what this thing is actually called, and I'm going to try my best. Naturliche Schöpfungsgeschichte, which included a map of Lemuria in support of his discussion of the history of creation. Haeckel, called an animalist by opponents, claimed the lemurs of his hypothetical Lemuria as man progenitors. He felt that some men, at least, descended from the lemurs or a common ancestor. One of the first to resent Haeckel's implications was Elena Petrova Blavatsky, the Russian theosophist, who, in her book The Secret Doctrine, 1888, declared on the basis of clairvoyant knowledge that Lemuria indeed had existed, but that a superior race of mankind developed there independently of the half-apes or lemurs. And so the story grew. Accounts of fabled Lemuria multiplied during the first half of this century. Probably the most influential popularizer was Rudolf Steiner, who had Lemuria and a divine origin for man in his carefully developed cosmology. Some of the most recent writings have been produced by the Lemurian Fellowship, a group regarding man as having descended from a higher spiritual state, rather than having risen from a lower animal one. They suggest that the Garden of Eden was on Lemuria and feel that man may someday regain his lost powers by developing a higher spiritual consciousness, such was achieved by the Lemurians. Lemuria, the lost continent of the Pacific, written under the pseudonym W.S. Chev, is especially interesting locally because it is one of the accounts that places Lemurians within the sublime and mystical Mount Shasta, basing his description on scientific facts and pseudo-scientific fabrications, and frequently referring to the non-existent scrolls, records, quote-unquote proofs, and relics. Sev claims that the western part of the United States, including California, is the last remnant of the sunken continent of Lemuria, and a few survivors of the glorious race live aloof from modern man in Siskiyou County's extinct volcano. These Lemurians run from 6 to 7 feet tall, have large, long, muscular arms. Their large heads rest on long, slender necks. They have small ears, broad noses with large nostrils, small, regular teeth. They eat little meat, and large, clear brown eyes. Their hair is dark and fine, short on top, but long, often braided down the back. In the center of a high forehead, about half-inch above the nose, each Lemurian has a walnut-sized protrusion, which serves as a remarkable extra sense organ by which mental telepathy is easy and natural, and which allows one to experience the fourth dimension. The Lemurians have found, Zev says, the one dependable source of positive knowledge, the cosmic mind. They had solved all the great problems of life and had found solutions to all the mysteries. They had no beliefs which were not demonstrable truths, and one of their beliefs was the fact of reincarnation. The Lemurians are sometimes described as little people, but the well-informed are quick to correct this wild surmise. The little men reported seen on and about Mount Shasta are not Lemurians at all. Real Lemurians, after all, are knot-headed, hulking 7-footers, and some expert occultists have even gone so far as to imply that the short guys don't even exist, being merely figments of fecund imaginations. Such skepticism ironically tends to cast oblique doubts on the Lemurian legend also. If the legend persists, it will be primarily among the people who I suppose may make their Lemurians large or small. Folklore may even survive the dubious help offered it by all seeking occultists and even eager businessmen who publicize a Lemurian myth in hopes of drawing tourists and their gold. Creative writers at College of the Siskiyous, located at the foot of Mount Shasta on the Shastina side, have decided to call their publication The Lemurian. The title is appropriate for a number of reasons. The fabrication of myths is primarily a literary business. All sincere mythological creations are attempts to concretely encompass the real and point toward the ideal. Behind every durable myth, there is a concealed core, a pillar of actuality, and it is not primarily the fault of the fable nor of the myth maker, that we are so often willing to accept a shadow of the truth in place of plunging painfully into the heart of the matter. I think that offers some wonderful food for thought, because what we see 60 years later, but especially what I noticed in this last or one of the paragraphs here where he said, they had no beliefs which were not demonstrable truths, and one of their beliefs was the fact of reincarnation. And for me, that is a demonstrable truth. So 60 years later, that is a demonstrable truth for a lot of us. It's not such an out there thought. And so, yeah, it's been 60 years. I think we've come a long way. One of the poems in here is an example of how this information came through back then and how it comes in now. And this is why it's so hard to put a finger on it, to prove it. It's because it comes through our mind's eye, and it feels like it comes through our imagination. And the reality is, this is how these beings speak to us. This is how our higher self speaks to us. We speak in our mind. This is how the Sasquatch speak. This is how extraterrestrial beings, if I could spit it out, extraterrestrial, this is how they speak. This is how trees and plant life speak telepathically through the mind, through the thought. So here's this poem I wanted to share with you called An Orbital Light by M.E Burger. A figure of white approached me one night, in a dream as they often do. In desperation and fright, I reached for the light, for I felt like a trembling dew. But she stayed where she was, this lady in white, and refrained from entering my room. Her hair was of black, of raven black, her skin was of cameo hue. Her lips were of rose, a delicate rose, and her eyes said, I beckon to you. She reached for the latch, the unopened latch. In a trance I followed her out. The night was still, the sky was bespewed with stars all sprinkled about. Beyond was a mountain of white, and above was the light of the moon. The light of the moon gave light to the clouds. Alas, who created this rune? The circle of light shallowed a halo so bright. The halo encircled the moon. The moon in its flights chose a path to the right, as though in a night of high noon. That orbital flight on Mount Shasta that night made me think of all God's rune. The dark of the night framed the ethereal sight, and it disappeared all too soon. Now the door is unlatched, and I leave it unlatched, for that raven-haired lady in white to beckon me soon by the light from the moon on another celestial night. And I think we will leave it there for today, everyone. Lots to ponder. And I'm going to leave you with this song by Dea Dova, While You Do, Voices in the Stone. Until next time, I love you all.
We're going, I am in ini. We're going, I am in ini. Kamwani awa walu, kawela wo, kawela wo, kawela wo, kawela wo, kawela wo. Koelela wo, koelela wo, ina mama ke akuanu, ina mama ke ane o, ina mama ke akuanu, ina mama ke ane o. Que aneu, Ina mama ke akuanu, ina mama ke aneo, ke aneo, e aneo, Ina mama ke akuanu, ina mama ke aneo, ke aneo. Ina mama ke akuanu, ina mama ke aneo, ke aneo, ke aneo. Well,